6:03 a.m. Tuesday, sun just clearing the pines. I'm behind my cedar fence, coffee ice cold, staring at my $1.8 million backyard, 12 years mine. Delphine Ashworth, HOA queen in a red power suit, beams for 20 neighbors. Silver scissors flash, snip, red ribbon falls. A glossy sign slams down, community garden, donated by Meadowbrook HOA, planted smack on Sarah's rose bed, my wife's pride before cancer stole her 3 years back. Claps explode. Genius, Delphine! I only hear the blade. Phone buzzes. Text from Jake Sullivan, childhood pal, now county governor. Saw your garden on the news. Looks great. Whose land again? Ribbon hits the grass. Delphine poses for selfies. My dirt, their party, and the governor just asked the $1,000,000 question. They celebrated on stolen land and accidentally looped in the boss of the county. What would you do if your HOA crushed your late wife's roses and live streamed it to the governor? Comment now. Next. Court, 7-figure lawsuit, Delphine's dirty secret. Let me back up and tell you how a guy ends up watching his dead wife's roses get bulldozed on live TV. Name's Rex Thornfield, 52, widowed electrician who thought buying 1.2 acres in Meadowbrook was hitting the jackpot. Sarah picked this place in 2011 specifically for that back half acre, her future pottery studio, and what she called my dirt therapy zone. We paid $340,000, which felt like monopoly money then. But Sarah had this vision. Morning coffee, watching deer browse her roses, afternoon clay work in the shed we'd build, evening planning sessions for her dream retirement garden. The scent of her lavender bushes mixing with fresh coffee became our daily ritual. Sarah was the neighborhood saint. Brought cookies to HOA meetings, organized spring cleanups, even helped design those pretentious community mailboxes. When Delphine Ashworth moved in 8 years ago, Sarah welcomed her with homemade bread and gardening tips. Rookie mistake. Delphine rolled up in a BMW X5 with temporary plates, designer everything, talking about elevating neighborhood standards. Real estate agent naturally. Within 6 months, she was HOA president. Within a year, 3 longtime families had mysteriously decided to pursue other opportunities. Her technique was beautiful, really. Find the tiniest violation, grass a 1/4 inch too tall, holiday lights up past January 2nd, car parked 6 inches over the driveway line, then escalate like a federal prosecutor. Formal complaints, mandatory hearings, fines that somehow always targeted the retirees, single moms, anyone without a war chest for legal battles. Sarah watched it happen, but stayed Switzerland. Not our circus, not our monkeys, she'd say, deadheading roses while Delphine systematically purged our neighbors. Then cancer crashed our party. Ovarian stage 3, 18 months of chemo hell, surgery, false hope, crushing despair, repeat cycle. During her worst days, I'd find Sarah sketching pottery studio floor plans from bed, talking about someday donating our land for conservation. Promise me something, she whispered during her final week, voice thin as tissue paper. Don't let them pave paradise for a parking lot. 3 weeks after we buried her, Delphine's harassment campaign began. First, courtesy notices about property maintenance deficiencies. Sarah's roses were overgrown and aesthetically concerning. Her pottery shed needed structural evaluation for community safety. The blackberry patch was a wildlife attraction creating neighborhood disruption. I was running on grief autopilot, so I ignored them. Mistake number 2. Then Delphine appeared at my door with a clipboard and that funeral director voice. Rex, I understand the bereavement process impacts property maintenance. Perhaps community intervention could address your challenges. My challenges? My dead wife's garden was a challenge now? 3 months later, she showed up with some guy in a reflective vest claiming routine neighborhood assessment. I was pulling doubles downtown, rewiring the medical center's emergency systems. Neighbor Thomas Vega mentioned seeing them measure everything, but I figured standard HOA busy work. Here's what I learned too late. Delphine doesn't just run the HOA, she owns the ecosystem. Husband Bradley controls mortgages at First Community Bank. Her real estate firm manipulates listings countywide. Cross Delphine, suddenly your loan gets reviewed, your appraisal tanks, your permits vanish into bureaucratic black holes. The morning everything exploded, I was drinking coffee from Sarah's favorite mug, blue ceramic with hand-painted roses, finally ready to tackle her pottery supplies. Then Janet Kruger's next-door post nuked my phone. Thank you, Delphine Ashworth, for finally fixing the Thornfield eyesore. This community garden will restore our property values. Attached, professional architectural renderings, raised beds, tool shed, parking area. on my land. Every rose Sarah planted, every memory we built, marked for execution. The county assessor's office suddenly became my destination. Martha Hendricks at the county office pulled my property records with the weary efficiency of someone who'd seen every scam in the book. The metallic click of her stapler echoed as she assembled 12 years of clean documentation. Clear title, original survey, everything legitimate, she said, sliding papers across her scratched desk. Then her expression darkened. Though it's weird, some woman in a red power suit requested these exact records 2 weeks ago, said she was doing community planning research. The coffee I'd grabbed on the way in suddenly tasted like battery acid. Delphine had been casing my property like a professional thief. I drove home clutching those papers like a lifeline and called Delphine directly. Maybe this was just some cosmic misunderstanding. "Oh, Rex," she cooed, with the synthetic warmth of a funeral director. "Grief can really cloud property boundary perceptions. Our professional survey shows that area was always community space. I'm sure Sarah would want you involved in something positive for the neighborhood." She was gaslighting me about my own deed while weaponizing my dead wife's memory. The sheer brass was almost artistic. Years ago, during my union training, an old electrician named Murphy taught us that crooked contractors always leave paper trails. "Get the permits, kid," he'd growl. "Liars document their lies." I'd never forgotten that advice, and suddenly it felt prophetic. I filed a public records request that afternoon, $47 in exact change to expose what I suspected was fraud. 3 days later, Delphine's permit application landed on my kitchen table like a smoking gun. She'd claimed my backlot was abandoned HOA common space needing environmental restoration. The photos she'd submitted were masterpieces of deception. Every angle designed to make Sarah's pottery shed look like a condemned crack house, every overgrown corner highlighted like evidence of neglect. But the real artistry was in her fabricated documentation. Fake landscaping receipts dating back 5 years. Fictional maintenance logs showing HOA crews working land they'd never touched. She'd created an entire alternate reality where my property belonged to her. The approval signature made everything click. Jim Crocker, Deputy County Administrator. The same Jim Crocker whose Facebook golf photos featured Bradley Ashworth every Thursday. This wasn't just HOA overreach. It was textbook municipal corruption, complete with paper trails and photographic evidence. Instead of storming Delphine's office like my rage demanded, I channeled Murphy's wisdom and started documenting everything. 12 years of utility bills proving I'd maintained the pottery shed, property tax receipts, photos of every inch of my land. If Delphine wanted a paper war, I'd bury her in evidence, but she wasn't finished playing games. The next HOA meeting felt like walking into a courtroom where the judge, jury, and executioner all wanted me dead. Delphine had moved the venue to her friend's real estate office, home field advantage, and packed the room with 23 neighbors who looked like they'd rather be getting root canals. Her PowerPoint presentation was corporate theater at its finest. Property value enhancement through community wellness initiatives flashed across a borrowed projector screen while she clicked through slides proving the garden would boost everyone's home values by 15%. Then came the character assassination portion of our evening's entertainment. Unfortunately, Delphine sighed, removing her reading glasses with practice drama, Mr. Thornfield hasn't maintained the property appropriately since his wife passed. Several neighbors can testify that the area has become problematic. 5 people stood like trained seals. Tomas Vega mumbled about abandoned lots. Janet Kruger nodded sadly about property values. Bradley's bank buddies and Delphine's real estate clients chimed in with suspiciously similar talking points about community standards. I recorded every rehearsed word on my phone, watching Delphine conduct her orchestra of manufactured outrage. The stale coffee smell in that cramped office mixed with nervous sweat and expensive perfume as my neighbors decided my fate based on lies. After the meeting, I cornered Tomas in the parking lot under harsh sodium lights. "Really, Thomas, my land looks abandoned?" He studied his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. "Look, Rex, Delphine's handling my mom's house sale. She mentioned that supporting community projects was important for attracting quality buyers. There was the leverage. Real estate commissions buying manufactured testimony. Delphine's closing announcement still echoed in my ears. Construction begins in 2 weeks. We've hired contractors and ordered materials. This community deserves better, with or without Mr. Thornfield's cooperation." She'd just declared war in front of 23 witnesses while I secretly recorded her confession. What Delphine didn't realize was that her perfect conspiracy was about to become her perfect downfall. Tuesday, 7 a.m. The rumble of diesel engines murdered my morning coffee ritual as 3 trucks rolled up like an occupying army. Burley Brothers Construction, according to door magnets that looked fresh from Kinko's. Out stepped Dale Ashworth, though I didn't know he was Bradley's cousin yet, swagger suggesting someone had promised him easy money. "Morning, Mr. Thornfield," Dale announced, clipboard gleaming like a weapon. "Site preparation and environmental assessment. Got county permits, so we'll need access to your back lot." 3 guys with equipment headed for my property line like they owned the deed. The metallic clink of surveying tools mixed with diesel exhaust as they started measuring Sarah's rose beds. "Gentlemen, that's private property." Dale's grin could have frozen antifreeze. "Sir, we have HOA development authorization. You're interfering with lawful activities." "Want me to call Sheriff Santos?" His crew was already driving stakes into my soil, cameras clicking, treating my wife's memorial garden like a construction zone. Mrs. Peterson watched from across the street, probably speed dialing the gossip network. That night I worked until midnight installing my security system, military-grade trail cameras with night vision and GPS coordinates for every angle. If these clowns wanted to trespass, they'd star in their own crime documentary. I also printed weatherproof no trespassing signs using exact GPS coordinates from my survey. Murphy from the Electricians Union always said, "Make them prove you're wrong with math, kid." Wednesday's return engagement brought Dale's crew plus some county inspector who looked like he'd rather be golfing with Bradley. But this time, I was ready for the show. I met them at my property line with Jasper, my one-eyed German shepherd with trust issues, a thermos of Sarah's coffee blend, and 30 laminated copies of my deed. The crisp snap of papers being shuffled sounded like bureaucratic gunfire. "Morning, boys. Coffee?" I distributed cups like a church social hostess. "Since you're here, thought you might enjoy reviewing actual property boundaries before accidentally starring in my security footage committing trespassing violations." The inspector suddenly developed intense interest in his shoes. Dale's confidence evaporated like morning mist. "Look, Mr. Thornfield, Delphine Ashworth said this was pre-approved community space, showed us official permits, promised our company guaranteed county approval for future projects too." There it was, the golden confession. Delphine wasn't just stealing my land. She was running a municipal influence scam using fake authority to manipulate desperate contractors. "Dale, what's your company's full legal name?" "Burley Brothers Construction, LLC. Why?" I pulled up the state business registry on my phone. 3 recent permit denials, 2 projects stuck in county purgatory, 1 company desperate enough to believe Delphine's lies about having government connections. That's when Dale dropped the bombshell. "She said you were the only thing preventing community development approval. Mentioned you'd been difficult since your wife died." The audacity was breathtaking. Delphine had weaponized my grief to manipulate contractors into stealing my land. "Dale, I think we've both been conned. Want to see the real property survey?" 20 minutes later, Dale was apologizing profusely and asking if I knew any electrical contractors looking for honest construction partners. Funny how quickly people become reasonable when you stop their criminal activity with actual facts. But Delphine was just warming up her revenge machine. That afternoon brought a formal county complaint claiming my aggressive interference with authorized contractors was preventing essential community infrastructure development. She demanded a restraining order stopping my pattern of harassment toward municipal employees. Her witness statements read like a greatest hits collection. Janet Kruger worried about my declining mental stability. Thomas Vega described my increasingly erratic behavior. The same 5 neighbors from the HOA meeting recycling their character assassination material, I countered with trail camera footage showing Dale's crew trespassing, plus audio of Dale confessing he'd been deceived about permits. But here's where it got interesting. Delphine had filed everything using letterhead from Meadowbrook Community Development LLC. Quick Secretary of State search. That company didn't exist. Delphine had created fictional corporations to file legal documents, which crosses from civil fraud into felony territory. Meanwhile, neighbors started approaching me with whispered confessions. Janet admitted Delphine threatened to sabotage her house sale unless she supported the garden project. Wendell Pike revealed similar pressure about property tax reviews that might affect his fixed income. The conspiracy was bigger than my stolen land. Delphine had been systematically extorting half the neighborhood, using her real estate connections and Bradley's bank influence to terrorize anyone who might resist her schemes. The sweet scent of Sarah's surviving roses mixed with the sharp smell of my growing evidence files as I realized this wasn't just about my property anymore. This was about stopping a predator who'd turned our entire community into her personal ATM. Thursday morning. My phone buzzed with a voicemail that made my coffee taste like liquid anxiety. Mr. Thornfield County Environmental Department, multiple complaints about wetland violations and hazardous waste disposal on your property. Inspector Rodriguez arrives Monday. Potential fines up to $50,000. 50 grand for pottery clay and rose fertilizer. Delphine had gone nuclear. Her anonymous complaints claimed I'd been dumping chemical waste and violating wetland protection laws. Sarah's pottery kiln was now an environmental hazard requiring emergency remediation. The woman's creativity was almost admirable if it wasn't trying to bankrupt me. I called every environmental consultant in the yellow pages until Elena Vasquez agreed to squeeze me in Friday. She arrived with equipment that looked like it belonged on Mars and the attitude of someone who'd busted every environmental scam in the book. Let's see what kind of disaster we're dealing with, Elena said, unpacking sensors and soil sample kits. The electronic chirping of her pH meters mixed with afternoon birdsong as she worked methodically around Sarah's pottery area. 2 hours later, Elena delivered a report that made me want to bronze it. Mr. Thornfield, your property isn't just compliant, it's beneficial. Your wife's pottery clay runoff created a micro-wetland that's attracting native species. This has higher conservation value than anything else in your zip code. Then Elena dropped a bombshell that made everything click. Funny thing, though, someone called me last month claiming to represent you, asking about expedited environmental violation assessments and fast-track property condemnation procedures. Wanted to know the fastest way to find environmental problems that could force a sale. I nearly choked on my coffee. What did you tell them? Told them it sounded like fraud and hung up, but now I'm realizing someone was shopping for experts willing to manufacture violations. Elena's eyes narrowed. Your HOA president wouldn't happen to drive a white BMW, would she? Delphine had tried to hire professionals to create fake environmental disasters. When Elena refused to play along, she'd just invented violations herself. That afternoon, I filed an ethics complaint with the county. Something my union steward taught us when crooked inspectors tried extortion schemes. Government officials can't weaponize environmental agencies for personal vendettas, and ethics complaints create permanent records that survive political changes. But Delphine was already launching her digital warfare campaign. Her Facebook group Meadowbrook Environmental Action exploded with carefully edited photos of my property. Every caption screamed crisis, unregulated development destroying our ecosystem, and toxic contamination threatens children's health. She organized a community safety documentation event, basically crowdsourced espionage where volunteers photographed my land from every adjacent property. 200 members in 3 days. 200 people convinced that Sarah's memorial garden was Chernobyl. Janet Kruger infiltrated the group and forwarded me Delphine's private coaching sessions. Focus on potential contamination sources. Emphasize property value impacts. Mention children's safety. That always triggers county response. It was like watching a masterclass in manufacturing panic. Monday's inspection felt like a show trial. Inspector Davis Montenegro arrived with official documentation, but Delphine appeared with 3 backup dancers insisting on community oversight for transparency. My backyard became a reality TV set where environmental compliance was entertainment. Elena's preemptive report demolished every accusation. Clean soil samples, normal pH levels, 0 violations. Montenegro stamped my property environmentally compliant, while Delphine loudly questioned his competence and demanded independent laboratory verification. After the audience dispersed, Montenegro pulled me aside near Sarah's pottery wheel. 15 years doing this job, I've seen this pattern. Real estate agents manufacturing environmental crises to force property sales. Miss Ashworth kept coaching observers on what to photograph and which angles would look most threatening. That's not concerned citizen behavior. That's evidence tampering. He handed me official compliance documentation. Document everything, consider filing harassment charges, and watch your back. People who make false environmental claims usually escalate when their schemes fail. While this bureaucratic circus performed, elderly Wendell Pike approached with something that hit me like emotional lightning. His late wife Eleanor had been Sarah's pottery partner and dearest friend. He'd been secretly documenting Delphine's campaign because he knew Sarah would want her sanctuary protected. Eleanor saved every letter Sarah wrote about the pottery studio, Wendell whispered, pressing a thick envelope into my hands. 15 years of plans for conservation, dreams of donating the land as wildlife preserve, fears about development pressure destroying everything she loved. Inside were dozens of letters in Sarah's familiar handwriting describing her sacred earth space, where she could touch clay and feel God's presence. Her final letter mentioned consulting lawyers about harassment from certain neighbors who see dollar signs instead of natural beauty. The antiseptic smell of Elena's testing chemicals mixed with earthy pottery clay scent as I realized Delphine wasn't just stealing land, she was desecrating Sarah's vision and destroying her conservation legacy. That night, organizing Sarah's papers in her pottery studio, I found the envelope that changed everything. Tucked behind her glazing supplies, labeled Property Insurance Keep Safe in her careful script. Inside, the original 1987 land survey establishing Meadowbrook's boundaries, plus yellowed correspondence between Sarah's grandfather and the developer. The papers smelled like old roses and decades of secrets. The survey revealed what Delphine never knew existed. Sarah's family had negotiated to exclude our backlot from HOA jurisdiction entirely. The subdivision agreement was crystal clear. Lot 47B shall remain under individual ownership as agricultural preserve and may not be subject to community development without unanimous board approval and explicit owner consent. Agricultural preserve. Exempt from HOA control forever. Sarah's grandfather had paid an extra $15,000 in 1987 to ensure that protection. The covenant was recorded with the county and had never been revoked, still legally binding after 36 years. Every permit Delphine filed, every development plan she submitted, every community project she proposed, all illegal without my written consent. But the real bombshell was buried deeper in Sarah's files. Correspondence from Delphine's firm dating back 6 months before Sarah's death. The letters started friendly, exciting development opportunities, then escalated to threats about upcoming assessment increases and potential code enforcement issues. Sarah had been secretly consulting attorney Rebecca Chang about the harassment. Her handwritten notes revealed the bigger picture. Delphine's firm was selling Meadowbrook to Pacific Northwest Property Management for $47 million, with a $2.3 million bonus if she could deliver complete community development rights. My independent lot was the only obstacle to her multi-million-dollar payday. Sarah's notes documented everything. Janet's mortgage troubles, Wendell's tax disputes, Thomas's permit denials, all traced to Delphine's municipal connections. She wasn't running an HOA, she was operating a real estate extortion racket. The timeline made my chest tight. Sarah's cancer diagnosis coincided with harassment escalation. She'd spent her final months fighting this battle while I worked double shifts, completely unaware that Delphine was slowly killing my wife with legal terrorism. Sarah's last letter to Rebecca Chang shattered me. The stress is affecting my treatment response. Rex doesn't know how bad this has become. I won't burden him while he's watching me die, but if something happens, please help him understand our land was never just property. It was our sanctuary, and it needs protection. She'd died defending our home while I remained oblivious. But Sarah had been building a nuclear weapon. Every fraudulent document Delphine submitted, annotated with careful notes documenting lies, property boundaries mapped with surveyor precision, financial records proving continuous ownership. Most importantly, she'd discovered the covenant's power provision. I could demand complete HOA financial disclosure for any development affecting my property. Delphine would have to reveal her $47 million sale agreement and the commission motivating her crimes. Sarah had also documented Delphine's pattern across the neighborhood, systematic targeting of longtime residents, manufactured violations, coordinated municipal pressure, a conspiracy spanning years, affecting dozens of families. The evidence was overwhelming. Fraud, extortion, municipal corruption, real estate conspiracy. Sarah had documented everything while fighting cancer and protecting me from worry. As I sat surrounded by her meticulous work, the pottery wheel silent beside stacks of legal ammunition, I finally understood the scope of Sarah's sacrifice. She'd fought this war alone, building the case that would eventually destroy Delphine while her own body was failing. The sweet scent of dried clay mixed with old paper as I made a promise to Sarah's memory. She'd given me everything needed to complete her fight and protect our sanctuary forever. Delphine thought she was stealing land from a grieving widower. She had no idea she'd declared war on a woman who'd spent her final months building the perfect legal trap. Time to spring it. Friday morning. Sarah's evidence collection covered my kitchen table like a war room briefing. I called Rebecca Chang, and the sharp intake of breath through the phone told me everything. "Rex, your wife just handed us a legal nuclear weapon," Rebecca said, papers rustling as she processed the implications. "That 1987 covenant makes every action Delphine's taken completely illegal. But here's the beautiful part. Don't reveal it yet. Let her dig deeper before we detonate this bomb. The strategy was delicious in its simplicity. Document every crime while Delphine thinks she's winning, then crush her with evidence she never saw coming. Wendell Pike's living room became our secret headquarters. His perpetual coffee pot and homemade cookies created the perfect cover. Who suspects conspiracy at a senior citizen's house? The sweet scent of sugar and caffeine mixed with the electric tension of neighbors finally ready to fight back. My team assembled like something from a heist movie. Janet Kruger brought accounting skills and financial records. Tomas Vega contributed construction expertise and permit documentation. Elena Vasquez provided environmental science credentials. Martha Hendricks from County Records agreed to help after hours. Wink, wink. Janet's first discovery made me want to frame her spreadsheets. Delphine had embezzled $47,000 through unauthorized HOA assessments, including payments to companies she owned herself. My old union steward Murphy always said embezzlers can't help but pay themselves. Greed leaves fingerprints, kid. Thomas revealed the permit corruption network. Legitimate resident projects got buried in red tape while Delphine's schemes sailed through approval. Elena identified environmental violations in Delphine's other developments, the same violations she'd tried manufacturing on my property. We built our database with Janet's accounting software, categorizing every fraud, every bribe, every threatened neighbor. The clicking of calculator keys mixed with whispered strategy sessions as our evidence file grew from briefcase to banker's box size. Martha provided the smoking gun. Delphine's projects consistently received approval from the same 5 county officials, all connected to Bradley's bank or Delphine's real estate empire. Corruption patterns are like electrical circuits. Once you trace the connections, the whole system becomes obvious. But our secret weapon was Delphine's desperation timeline. Rebecca discovered her sale deadline was approaching fast. Deliver complete community control by month's end or lose her $2.3 million commission. Desperate people make stupid mistakes, and we'd be recording every one. Community outreach revealed the scope of Delphine's terrorism. 60% of neighbors had been harassed, but fear kept them isolated. Coordinating their stories created an overwhelming pattern no jury could dismiss as coincidence. Miranda Walsh, investigative reporter extraordinaire, nearly spilled her coffee when I described our case. Rex, I've been tracking similar HOA takeovers in 12 communities. Your evidence could topple an entire corruption network. This is front-page material. Our technical preparation felt like mission planning. County GIS systems provided professional boundary documentation. Elena taught us environmental violation identification techniques. Martha showed us how to trace permits through bureaucratic networks, exposing Delphine's corruption pathways. I moved precious documents to a safe deposit box while ensuring multiple people had copies. Basic security protocol learned from union organizing drives. Rebecca warned that cornered fraudsters often escalate to violence, so we developed communication systems and safety protocols. The most satisfying element was our psychological warfare strategy. Instead of immediately crushing Delphine with Sarah's evidence, we'd let her continue committing crimes while recording everything. Maximum legal damage required maximum criminal exposure. Each evening, our conspiracy convened in Wendell's kitchen. The warm scent of his legendary chocolate chip cookies mixed with the intoxicating possibility of finally achieving justice. For months, I'd been drowning in grief and rage. Now I was channeling both into methodical revenge. Elena suggested we prepare media documentation of Delphine's environmental crimes across multiple properties. Janet proposed forensic accounting analysis of her embezzlement patterns. Tomas offered to record conversations with other contractors who'd been manipulated by fake permit promises. Our investigation expanded beyond my property to encompass Delphine's entire criminal empire. Real estate fraud, municipal corruption, environmental violations, witness intimidation. She'd built a comprehensive illegal enterprise that had been terrorizing families for years. As Delphine's deadline approached, her desperation would force bigger risks and bolder crimes. We'd be positioned to document every violation while building criminal cases that would destroy her completely. The irony was perfect. While Delphine thought she was stealing land from a grieving widower, Sarah's ghost was building the legal trap that would end her career and send her to prison. Wendell raised his coffee mug and toast that final planning evening, to Sarah's memory and Delphine's downfall. The satisfied clink of ceramic echoed like courthouse gavels as we prepared to serve justice that was 36 years overdue. Game time was approaching, and we held all the cards Sarah had secretly dealt us. Wednesday night, 2 a.m. Security alerts exploded my phone while I was elbow deep in medical center wiring, installing emergency generators for the cardiac wing. Trail cameras triggering, motion sensors screaming, my property under attack while I was trapped 40 miles away saving lives. Real-time footage showed 3 figures in county maintenance uniforms systematically destroying Sarah's pottery studio. The screech of chainsaws cutting through her memorial oak trees mixed with the wet splash of industrial chemicals being dumped around her pottery wheels. They spray-painted "environmental hazard" across walls where Sarah's handprints still marked clay storage shelves. I watched helplessly through my phone as strangers desecrated the most sacred space in my world. The place where Sarah had spent her final healthy months, where she'd touched clay and dreamed of conservation futures, was being transformed into a toxic crime scene. Dawn revealed devastation that made my chest physically ache. Sarah's studio looked like Chernobyl, with chemical containers bearing county maintenance, authorized use-only labels scattered among destroyed pottery equipment. The sweet scent of her surviving lavender bushes now mixed with acrid industrial solvents that made my eyes water. But Rebecca's training kicked in, document before reacting. My trail cameras had captured everything, including Dale Ashworth's truck and 2 accomplices whose faces were clearly visible despite their pathetic disguise attempts. More importantly, the stolen chemicals came from a county facility, making this federal theft plus environmental terrorism. Elena arrived within 2 hours, her testing equipment beeping frantically as she collected samples. These are road maintenance solvents stolen from municipal storage. Someone with facility access orchestrated this operation. Here's where the psychology got beautiful. Instead of immediately exposing the video evidence, I let Delphine double down on her lies. She filed emergency environmental reports that morning, claiming overnight contamination detection required immediate property seizure for public safety. Local news crews, mysteriously pre-notified, arrived as Delphine posed among the planted evidence, explaining how concerned citizens discovered this environmental nightmare threatening neighborhood children. Watching her lie to cameras while I held footage of her crimes was almost therapeutic. The woman's commitment to fraud deserved scholarly study, perhaps from a federal penitentiary library. But this escalation revealed Delphine's desperation. With her deadline approaching and her $2.3 million commission at stake, she'd graduated from paperwork fraud to felony vandalism involving government employees. Each crime multiplied her potential prison sentence, while my evidence collection grew exponentially. The mini twist came when I traced the chemical theft deeper. The facility manager was Jim Crocker's brother-in-law, Dennis Crocker, who'd provided after-hours access to county maintenance supplies. This wasn't random vandalism. It was coordinated government corruption using public resources for private real estate schemes. County Inspector Montenegro arrived, looking deeply skeptical. Private conversation confirmed his suspicions. "Mr. Thornfield, this contamination pattern is completely artificial. Fresh chemical application, wrong substance profiles for pottery use, deliberate placement designed for maximum visual impact." Montenegro installed official monitoring equipment to catch future tampering attempts, essentially turning my property into a crime scene surveillance operation. If someone's manufacturing violations, we'll document every move. The community response surprised everyone, including me. Neighbors who'd previously stayed neutral began openly supporting me as news of the vandalism spread. Even former Delphine supporters expressed outrage about destroying Sarah's memorial space. Janet Kruger organized a restoration volunteer effort, collecting scattered pottery fragments with tears streaming down her face. This isn't about property disputes anymore. This is about human decency. Sarah's studio was sacred ground. Elderly Mrs. Peterson across the street approached with shaking hands, offering her security footage and a confession. Delphine threatened to report my grandson's parked car as abandoned vehicle if I didn't support her garden project. I'm done being scared of that woman. Our investigation revealed the scope of Delphine's terror campaign. Similar environmental emergencies had appeared at 3 other properties she'd targeted, always followed by pressure to sell at distressed prices. Professional vandalism as real estate acquisition strategy. Rebecca filed a comprehensive criminal complaint that read like a RICO prosecution. Conspiracy, theft of government property, environmental terrorism, filing false reports, witness intimidation. Federal charges carrying 20-year sentences. But the personal impact hit deepest that evening. Standing among the wreckage of Sarah's final creative space, I finally understood that this battle wasn't just about land. It was about protecting everything Sarah had loved from people who saw dollar signs instead of dreams. the acrid chemical smell mixed with Sarah's damaged roses as I made a promise to her memory. Delphine had destroyed our sanctuary, but she'd also provided perfect evidence of her own criminal enterprise. Her deadline desperation had forced the fatal mistake that would end her career and send her to federal prison. Sarah's legal trap was finally ready to spring. Friday morning, Delphine's deadline was Monday. 3 days to deliver complete community control or lose her $2.3 million commission. Desperation makes people stupid, and Delphine was about to prove that theorem spectacularly. Her first move was breathtakingly brazen, walking into Commissioner Crocker's office with a briefcase full of cash, $50,000 in neat stacks caught on security cameras that she didn't know existed. The metallic snap of briefcase locks echoed through hidden microphones as she laid out her offer. Emergency health situations require administrative flexibility, she purred, sliding money across his desk. This community needs protection from environmental hazards, and sometimes proper procedures take too long. What Delphine didn't know, Sheriff Maria Santos had been running a federal corruption investigation for 6 months, and Crocker's office was wired better than a Hollywood studio. Every word, every gesture, every illegal dollar was being recorded for posterity. But bribery was just her opening act. Next, she contacted Pacific Northwest Property Management, claiming I'd finally come to my senses and agreed to sell. She submitted forged sales documents with my signature traced so badly from tax records that my nephew could have spotted the fraud. Shaky lines, inconsistent pressure, desperation made visible in ballpoint ink. Then came the harassment charges. Pure fiction claiming I'd been stalking her family and making violent threats against community leaders. Her police report described encounters that never happened, conversations that existed only in her imagination, threats I'd never made. The smell of her desperation was almost as strong as the coffee I was drinking while reading her fabricated accusations. But here's where Elena Vasquez earned her place in my personal hall of fame. She'd been wearing a wire during recent consultation meetings with Delphine's team, and the recordings were prosecutorial gold. We've been creating these environmental emergencies for years, Delphine had bragged, thinking Elena was joining her fraud network. County officials are surprisingly cheap when you control their bank loans through my husband's connections. Federal agents practically applauded when Elena delivered those recordings. Clear admissions of conspiracy, bribery, and systematic fraud from the defendant's own mouth. The mini twist came from an unexpected source, Pacific Northwest Property Management's legal team. They'd grown suspicious of Delphine's claims and hired private investigators who discovered my property's exempt status and the forged documentation. Miss Ashworth has been misrepresenting fundamental facts for months, their attorney told Sheriff Santos. We're prepared to testify about her pattern of fraud and document forgery in pursuit of unauthorized commissions. A $50 million real estate deal turning against its own orchestrator, poetic justice with financial backing. That afternoon brought a call that changed everything. Governor Jake Sullivan, my childhood buddy I hadn't mentioned to anyone yet, reached out personally. Rex, the state attorney general's office has been tracking HOA fraud statewide. Your case contains the most comprehensive evidence we've seen. Would you testify before our legislative committee? Your story could reform the entire system protecting families like yours. My personal property dispute had somehow become the keystone case for statewide corruption reform. Sarah's garden was about to change laws protecting every homeowner in the state. The community response exploded when Miranda Walsh published her 3-part investigative series. The Meadowbrook Conspiracy detailed Delphine's fraud network across multiple counties, complete with victim interviews and timeline graphics showing systematic targeting of vulnerable residents. Social media erupted with #justice for Sarah hashtags as the story gained national traction. Over 200 families contacted news outlets with similar harassment stories, creating an avalanche of evidence that buried Delphine's remaining credibility. Her allies scattered like roaches when lights came on. Commissioner Crocker's lawyer announced cooperation with federal investigators. Dale Ashworth's attorney issued statements denying knowledge of criminal activities. Even Bradley Ashworth filed for divorce and revealed that Delphine had been using his bank connections without authorization. My wife's actions represent personal choices that violated both legal standards and our marriage, Bradley announced through counsel, the ultimate betrayal from her closest co-conspirator. Federal investigation expanded beyond my property to encompass 12 communities where similar fraud patterns emerged. Estimated damages exceeded $15 million, transforming my individual case into an interstate criminal enterprise prosecution. Sheriff Santos coordinated with federal prosecutors for Monday morning arrests. Delphine's deadline day would become her judgment day. The timing was perfect. Maximum psychological impact while her desperation peaked. Standing in Sarah's damaged garden that evening, watching her roses slowly recover from vandalism, I felt her presence guiding everything toward completion. The sweet scent of healing lavender mixed with anticipation of justice finally being served. Delphine had escalated to federal crimes while believing she was unstoppable. Her deadline pressure had forced the fatal mistakes that would ensure maximum penalties and complete vindication. 3 days until her deadline. 3 days until federal arrests. 3 days until Sarah's legal trap finally closed forever. Monday morning, deadline day. The community center buzzed with 200-plus people crammed into a space built for half that number. The metallic screech of folding chairs being arranged mixed with nervous whispers as neighbors prepared to witness either my vindication or complete humiliation. I arrived with Rebecca and our evidence boxes, flanked by supporters who'd been terrorized for years. Miranda Walsh's camera crew positioned for maximum drama while the smell of stale coffee and anticipation filled the overcrowded room. Delphine made her entrance like a queen attending her own execution, cream power suit pristine, single attorney trailing behind looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. She still believed her manipulation skills could overcome federal investigations and overwhelming evidence. Then the doors opened and Governor Jake Sullivan walked in. The collective gasp sucked oxygen from the room as cameras swiveled toward my childhood friend taking a front row seat. Delphine's confident smile cracked like ice in spring. She'd just realized this wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake announced, his voice carrying gubernatorial authority, "recent events in Meadowbrook have prompted statewide investigation into systematic HOA fraud and municipal corruption." He paused, looking directly at me, with a slight smile. When my old friend Rex Thornfield called about neighbors claiming his dead wife's garden, I had no idea we'd uncover a criminal enterprise affecting thousands of families across our state. Delphine's face went ash gray as she processed the implications. She'd been fighting the governor's best friend while committing federal crimes. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. "Rex," Jake continued, "your battle to protect Sarah's sanctuary has become the catalyst for reforming an entire system. Today we honor her memory by ensuring no family endures what yours has suffered. My turn." I approached the microphone carrying Sarah's favorite pottery studio photograph and the 1987 covenant that would destroy Delphine's world. 12 years ago, my wife Sarah chose our home specifically for the back lot where she dreamed of pottery studios and conservation gardens. My voice steady, despite my racing heart. 3 years ago, cancer stole Sarah from us. 6 months ago, Delphine Ashworth began stealing the sacred ground where Sarah's ashes rest among her roses. I methodically unveiled evidence like a prosecutor closing the case of the century. Trail camera footage of criminal vandalism, audio recordings of bribery attempts, financial proof of systematic embezzlement. Each revelation brought audible gasps from an audience witnessing corruption exposed in real time. "But Sarah left me something Delphine never knew existed," I continued, holding up the yellowed covenant. "The 1987 Agricultural Preserve Agreement that exempts our property from all HOA control forever." The silence was deafening as people processed the legal nuclear bomb. Every permit Delphine filed, every development she planned, every neighbor she threatened, illegal from day one. This document proves she never had authority to touch one blade of grass on my wife's memorial garden. Then came my mic drop moment. Today I'm honoring Sarah's final wish by donating our land as the Sarah Thornfield Memorial Wildlife Preserve, ensuring Delphine can never profit from destroying what my wife died protecting. Thunderous applause mixed with camera flashes as neighbors realized they'd witnessed the complete legal annihilation of their tormentor. Delphine's response was beautiful in its desperation. She blamed everyone except herself. Crocker misled her. I'd fabricated evidence. Grief had made me delusional about property boundaries. Her attorney physically winced as she contradicted his advice and deeper buried herself with every panicked word. "Mr. Thornfield's mental instability since his wife's death has created dangerous delusions about property ownership," she declared to a room full of people holding evidence of her crimes. Sheriff Santos chose that perfect moment for her entrance, federal agents flanking like an honor guard. "Delphine Ashworth, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, fraud, environmental terrorism, and racketeering." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through absolute silence as cameras captured every humiliating second of her perp walk. The coordinated arrests were cinematic perfection. Commissioner Crocker taken into custody at his office, while Dale Ashworth surrendered at the federal building. The entire corruption network dismantled with synchronized precision. Community testimony revealed the human cost of systematic fraud. Janet's retirement savings stolen through fake assessments. Wendell's fixed income threatened by tax manipulation. Thomas's business destroyed by permit corruption. 20 families describing years of harassment, intimidation, and financial terrorism. Governor Sullivan's closing announcement made everything permanent. The Sarah Thornfield Act will require independent oversight of all HOA development, criminal penalties for document forgery, and federal protection against municipal corruption. Sarah's fight becomes law, protecting every homeowner in America. Walking out under spring sunshine, the sweet scent of Sarah's recovering roses carried on warm breeze, I finally felt complete peace. Her battle was finished, her legacy protected, her memory honored through laws shielding thousands from similar predation. 6 months later, autumn painted Sarah's memorial preserve in brilliant oranges and reds as federal prosecutors delivered justice with surgical precision. Delphine pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges including fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and racketeering, receiving 8 years in federal prison plus $2. $7 million in restitution to victims across 3 counties. The sentencing hearing felt like Christmas morning for every family she'd terrorized. Judge Martinez didn't mince words. Miss Ashworth, you weaponized municipal systems against vulnerable residents, turning community leadership into criminal enterprise. Your actions represent the worst abuse of public trust this court has witnessed. Commissioner Crocker received 3 years for accepting bribes and was permanently banned from public office. Dale Ashworth got probation in exchange for testimony against the broader corruption network, and his construction company now partners with my electrical firm on legitimate community projects. Funny how quickly people become honest when their criminal options disappear. The financial justice was even sweeter. Pacific Northwest Property Management settled our class action lawsuit for $15.2 million, distributed among families affected by Delphine's schemes. I received $280,000 in damages but donated every penny to establish the Sarah Thornfield Conservation Fund, which now protects threatened green spaces from predatory development across 5 states. Janet Kruger recovered her entire retirement savings and became a nationally recognized consumer advocate, teaching workshops on HOA fraud recognition. Wendell Pike's property taxes were permanently reduced, and he's now the volunteer coordinator for our memorial preserve. Even Thomas Vega thrives. His construction business boomed after Delphine's permit corruption network collapsed, proving that honest work succeeds when corruption stops rigging the game. The preserve itself became everything Sarah dreamed and more. Her pottery studio, fully restored with community donations, now hosts children's environmental education programs where kids learn conservation through hands-on clay work. The sweet scent of her original rose bushes, now thriving without chemical contamination, greets over 500 monthly visitors who come for guided nature walks and HOA accountability workshops. I reduced my electrical work to part-time and found my true calling as a full-time advocate. Rebecca and I now consult with attorneys nationwide on HOA fraud cases, while I testify before legislative committees about municipal corruption. Jasper, my one-eyed German shepherd, earned therapy dog certification and accompanies me to court hearings where his gentle presence comforts other families fighting similar battles. The political impact exceeded our wildest hopes. Governor Jake signed the Sarah Thornfield Act into law with Sarah's pottery wheel as the signing table, creating mandatory oversight for HOA development projects, criminal penalties for forging property documents, and federal protection against municipal corruption. The legislation became a model for 17 other states, with my testimony before the US House Subcommittee on Consumer Protection inspiring federal HOA reform legislation. Our community transformed completely. Janet was elected HOA president on a platform of financial transparency and resident protection, implementing the nation's first victim assistance fund for families targeted by predatory schemes. Meadowbrook partnered with the State Attorney General's office to train residents in fraud recognition, becoming a model for transparent community governance. My documentation methods are now standard practice for property rights advocacy. The trail camera and GPS boundary techniques I developed are taught in law enforcement training programs, while Elena's mobile app helps homeowners document violations and prevent fraud through early detection. The broader movement Sarah's story inspired created the National HOA Reform Alliance, connecting victims of community association fraud and providing legal resources for fighting corruption. The organization successfully lobbied for federal legislation requiring standardized financial reporting and criminal background checks for property management executives. Technology carries Sarah's legacy forward too. Her pottery studio teaches children about environmental stewardship, while the preserve's research programs study micro-wetland conservation techniques. Scientists from 3 universities now use our land for climate change adaptation research, proving that protecting one family sanctuary can benefit entire ecosystems. But the most meaningful victory happens every morning when I drink coffee among Sarah's thriving roses, watching deer graze peacefully in the meadow she loved. The gentle rustle of wind through her memorial oak trees, the satisfied silence of knowing justice prevailed, the warm laughter of children learning pottery where she once touched clay and dreamed of conservation. These moments honor her memory better than any legal victory. If you're facing HOA harassment, remember, document everything, know your rights, build neighbor alliances, and never surrender to bureaucratic bullies. Your family's legacy matters more than their profit margins. Share your HOA nightmare stories below. Your experiences help identify fraud patterns and connect victims with resources. And hit subscribe for next week's video where Janet explains HOA financial auditing and embezzlement red flags.